As certified life coaches with 45 years combined experience in human resources, Jen Trum and Catherine Fry have both experienced the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, both personally and professionally. And what they each know to be true is this: our mental, physical, and emotional health are the essential building blocks in order to thrive and shine in the field of HR. So in a first of its kind podcast, we'll be getting real and to discuss and share what has contributed to both our struggles and successes, with the goal of inspiring women around the globe to stand tall and take the necessary action to both thrive and shine in HR. Here are your hosts, Jen and Catherine. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Thrive and Shine HR. I am Jen Trum, and as you can clearly see, Catherine is not with me today. Today, I am flying solo as we speak. She is on a ferry between St. John and St. Thomas. She went to a wedding over the weekend and is having an amazing time. And I hope that she is coming back tan and refreshed and really excited to join us for next week's conversation on setting boundaries. We'll talk about that at the end of the episode today. But today we are going to be talking about unlearning and what exactly is unlearning and how does it apply to us in our roles in human resources. So what I wanted to do is start out and thank everyone who participated in a poll that we put out both in our Women of HR support group on Facebook and also on LinkedIn. And the poll really asked, let me bring up the question here. The poll asked, what do most HR professionals need to unlearn in order to thrive and shine in the field of human resources? So the answers that we got from this poll were so good. And I really am excited to share this because I think for so many of us, it can be really easy to forget that there's so many things that we have learned and grown up with in our lives that really can be problematic when it comes to truly being able to shine, truly being able to thrive. And a lot of those, I think, are things that are under the surface, right? They're not things that you can necessarily see. These are the things that are going on inside. So what I want to do is go through the list and talk about the top things that came up, and then also highlight some of those of you who had additional things that you put out there that definitely resonated with myself and others as well. So the number one answer on both the Facebook and LinkedIn polls that we did on what we need to unlearn in order to thrive was around perfectionism. So letting go of perfectionism, embracing ourselves with more compassion. So I wanted to share with you something that I had found. According to a study published in the Journal of Occupational Health, perfectionism is linked to higher levels of stress, higher levels of burnout, for those of you who know exactly what I'm talking about, negative physical health and negative physical health outcomes among employees. So perfectionism is really the idea of trying to be perfect, right? Trying to meet this ideal of an expectation within yourself that you need to be a certain way, that there is a as good as it possibly can be. And that idea that you need to push, that you need to continue to do more than really you have within your tank in order to meet this ideal. And so one of them that came up in the poll, there was something somebody said. Let's see if I can find it for a second. So the need to be able to unlearn this idea that we have to be a certain way in order to be accepted by others was the quote that somebody put on the Facebook group. And boy, did that resonate, because when you think about perfectionism, when you think about wanting to try to continue to push ourselves towards this ideal that is actually unreachable, really the idea behind it is that we're seeking acceptance. We're seeking belonging. We're seeking validation. And when we push ourselves into places where maybe we deeply are not comfortable. We're not very happy about it, right? Like there's this disconnect between what it is we're trying to put out there and how it really resonates within ourselves. And that's where the divide begins for so many of us. And I think that begins really early on. I remember for myself, I never was one with good grades. I was never one who was trying to be perfect in that way. But the way that I would try to reach a level of quote unquote perfectionism was really around trying to morph myself, trying to be a chameleon around others, around what I felt others were wanting or expecting or needing from me. And that was exhausting. That level of trying to be something that you're not, that consistent push outside of our comfort zone, outside of what feels normal or comfortable can really create a toll within us. And so learning about that and becoming more conscious of my tendency to want to project to others what I think they want from me, right? This chameleon type response has been something that has been such a huge game changer in my life. And one of the people that I always go to in terms of my gurus on this is Mel Robbins. And Mel Robbins has a podcast, the Mel Robbins podcast. If you don't listen to it, you got to check it out. She really talks so much about this idea of society's views of what we believe is expected of us, and our inherent ability to be able to overcome those expectations outside of ourselves the more that we learn to become comfortable and self-accepting of ourselves. So really good stuff. All right, the next one that came up in the poll that was really high for so many people was around no people pleasing and not setting boundaries. People pleasing and boundary setting is so hard for us. And that really goes back to, for me, again, why I would try to project towards others is not only trying to achieve this desire of being great, being seen as wonderful by others, but also this idea that I'm trying to please others, right? You're trying to help others feel better around you, trying to convince others that you are worthy, that you're special, right? Like you could go deep down into it, but it really is this idea of within ourselves that we need to project something else. We need to please others. We need to cater to others. We need to be there for others, so much so that it then impacts our own ability to be healthy, our own ability to be emotionally grounded, because now we're stressed and we're overwhelmed because we're spending so much time pouring into other people. So boundary setting is our next week's topic. So that's so great that is something that we're going to be talking about soon, because I think it's something that for the vast majority of us, we struggle with is setting boundaries that are healthy in our relationships towards others, in our engagements towards others, in our lives in every way. And boundaries are really about being so true and honest with ourselves that we are no longer projecting anything other than the most authentic self towards others. And that is so challenging, right? Because we know that deep down, our most authentic self is not going to be something that others are going to perceive favorably. Last week, I gave an example of a supervisor that I worked with at one time who was really struggling because over the previous year or so, she had started to get more into personal development. She was starting to listen to Mel Robbins. She was starting to listen to Brene Brown. She was starting to really pay attention to how much within herself, her mindset would shift to negative, right? The negativity bias. She was starting to become more conscious around then how she would project out, what she would talk about, how that would come across, especially to a team that she worked with and they worked in pretty close confines. And so as she really came out of that and started to recognize, oh my gosh, this is something I need to change, in changing that, that really was seen as affront, it was an affront to those that she worked with. They weren't used to this new person who was trying to shut them down as they were just trying to vent and be negative and do all the things that we normally do so often. And as she started to gain the groundedness to be able to say, no, that's just not me anymore, the pushback was heavy. And so what I wanted to do today is kind of jump on that and talk about the pushback that we get when we choose to change, right? When we choose to change something that's no longer working for us. And a lot of times what will happen is perhaps it's when we recognize that, oh my goodness, I have been people pleasing. Oh my goodness. And really understanding that this is not something that deep within myself that I truly want to be, that I'm comfortable being. And that awareness, I think, is one thing that Catherine and I will continue to talk about every single week on this podcast and in this series. Oh, let me pause for 1 second. One thing that I think is so important for our listeners to know is that if listening to a podcast is not always your thing, and you also enjoy going and watching usually two people when she's not on a ferry from St. John to St. Thomas, but watching two people kind of be silly and have a little fun together. We also broadcast this podcast live on pretty much most of our social media channels. So you probably already know this, but I did want to say that because for those who do appreciate the video, you've got that option within Thrive and Shine. And then for those who like the podcast and like listening, you've got that option in Thrive and Shine as well. So anytime you are watching, and if you ever catch us live, which is on Monday mornings right now at this time, today is, as we speak, February 12th, and we go live at 7 a.m. Pacific and 8 a.m. Mountain, 10 a.m. Eastern. So, okay, back to people pleasing and setting boundaries. Kind of all over the place, but that's okay. So one thing that I wanted to say about people pleasing and setting boundaries is that when you are kind of really starting to learn and become aware of what it is that you are doing and the behaviors you're engaging in that are actually not true to yourself. And then taking that new awareness and learning how to start making the changes that need to be made, right? It's not going to go away when we know deep down that something is not for us, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a job. I'm going into a bit of preachy mode, and I apologize. Occasionally, this is how I roll, because when I really sense that there's something that we need to kind of hit on, and really it's around, every one of you listening and watching, the things that are not working for you. The things that are really unsettling to you. And it's something that just continues to fester, right? We might do little tweaks and pushes here and there, but that deeper awareness around what truly is and maybe is not right for us, we know. So according to the Journal of Applied Psychology, they talked about individuals who engage in excessive people-pleasing behavior, right? So you know who you are if you engage in excessive people-pleasing behavior. But when we engage in excessive people-pleasing behavior, we're more likely to experience emotional exhaustion, totally understand that, burnout, and reduced job satisfaction. So I'm going to take a sip of water, because I have a story to share. So I moved up to Southern Oregon. So I live in a little town called Medford, Oregon. Moved up here about 12 years ago. And when I first moved up here, we were so excited to leave the Sacramento area, just so crowded in California, coming up to Oregon, and just such a beautiful area. I don't know why I almost said beautiful twice. I don't know. Anyway, when we got up here, I got, a job. I was working in HR at the time, obviously. Got the job that I really thought I wanted. And within 6 months, it fell apart. The company was really struggling. And at that point now, here I am in little Southern Oregon and completely without a job, right? In a very, very small job market. So I ended up taking pretty much first thing I could find, and it was a terrible fit for me. I knew it in the interview. I knew it the first day. I knew it. Knew it. But in that environment, right, I needed to step up. There weren't other jobs in the area. I needed to do what I needed to do to be able to make it through. Nice rhyme. So in order to do what I needed to do to make it through, I needed to do a lot of people pleasing, right? I needed to show up and be something that deep down I knew I was not. And so during that time, it was really during that time that I really started to turn to alcohol in my life. And so for those of you who really understand that sometimes when you are pushing yourself to exhaustion because you are trying to please others, you're trying to push yourself beyond your own comfort zone on a regular basis, that for me, it was something that pushed me to the point that I felt like I needed a release, right? When I got off work at 5 p.m. every day, my go-to was red wine every day. And it got to the point where I started to numb myself and it became easier, right? In my brain, it became easier. I felt like I was able to get through the experience because now I was able to, once I got off work, just drink it away. And it got bad. We can talk about that in a future episode with Catherine because she and I both can really relate to how we began to turn to alcohol when we were really trying to regulate stress and emotions within our roles. And that I think is really common for people in high stress roles. So something to think about and something we'll definitely talk about in the future. But going back to then recognizing over the course of the next several months that I was miserable. And the more that I tried to use alcohol, the more that I tried to do anything, the more that it was festering, right? It was not going away. And so ultimately it was really one of the it was one of the first clicks I had truly in my personal growth journey, because I decided at that time to go on a limb and try to become a consultant, an HR consultant. And that only worked for about an hour. Hello, that only worked for about a year. And, I went back into the field and actually it was amazing and the best possible thing for me. But what it taught me at that time was learning how to step outside of myself and figure it out. And that's where boundaries come in, right? Is that you recognize, you now have the awareness that this is a behavior that's causing you trouble, right? You're recognizing that I've put myself into this position. I've put myself into this role where I am miserable. Now I'm recognizing that I'm using these devices. I'm using tools. I'm using whatever it is. For me, it was alcohol. So many other things we could do, right? Eating and watching and everything else. But basically recognizing, okay, I am using something now to numb myself because I'm clearly unhappy. And then starting to build the proactive plan to get myself out of it. And that's when I started to build a plan to start a business. And in retrospect, it was really a huge thing for me. It was one of the first times I really was able to take an awareness around an unpleasant circumstance that I had in my life and start to build a systematic and calculated plan to get myself out of it, right? Like building a business plan and doing this and doing that while I was still working. And so in looking back on that experience in my life, I will tell you now, it was not the end of the alcohol. That only happened early 2023, but it was the beginning of me starting to be more proactive in my own life, in my own destiny around what I know would make me happy, and taking away that element of people pleasing and putting myself in jobs, in roles with managers, all of that I truly deep down knew was not right for me. So that was a long answer on people pleasing and how that's shown up in my own life. So let's get back to the poll. I haven't seen a whole lot of people out there who have not experienced the impact of people pleasing in their own lives, personally and professionally. And I think the gut check that we can all do around people pleasing is really recognizing that, one, it's normal, it's natural that we want and we desire to, for other people, for people who are around us, for everything in our lives to accept us, for us to feel belonging, for us to feel acceptance, for us to have that connection with others. And so the journey that we go on, and one of the things that we preach and teach here at Thrive and Shine HR, is really around recognizing our own empowerment to be able to shift those things that we might feel helpless around, and that we might feel like we have to, or that we don't have any choice around the pleasing of others, and how can we become more empowered. Okay, the next one, it's perfect. It worked out this way. The next one in the poll that we did late last week in the Women of HR Support Group, HR group, and also on LinkedIn, is exhaustion does not equal achievement. And in my role in HR, and I think pretty much, I want to say like 90% of the people I've ever spoke to who are in a role of HR, we have a deep desire to see the organization and the people within it thrive. It's why we do what we do. It's why we show up and do what we do. And yet so often we are completely not in control of the outcome, right? I say so often, I want to say pretty much always, right? At the end of the day, what ends up being actually decided upon by senior leaders, owners, right, out of our control. Ultimately, how the employees of an organization perceive changes in policies, changes in programs, all of it, right? All of that is outside of our control. And yet within the role of HR, that's our job, right? Our job description is basically being able to support both the organization and the employees within the organization to help them thrive, right? And so knowing how much is outside of our control, and how much is within our hearts around why we do what we do, it's no wonder and it's no surprise that so many of us in HR struggle with exhaustion and burnout. It's no surprise at all. And so when I go back to my example of when I first moved up to Oregon and became a consultant, right? So I started out in HR and then jumped out on my own and said, I'm going to try to do this on my own. There is no jobs in this area. And I believe that I have something that can help people. And that in of itself, that belief in myself that I can help people, that I had something that could help, right, is, I believe, the belief that all of us have, that within us, we know deep down, we have something that is of value in this world. There is something within every single one of you that is of tremendous value in this world. And I think the maddening thing for so many of us is when we are in roles, when we are in a particular chapter in our lives where it does not feel that way at all, that can be the moment where many of us will, it's almost like we trick ourselves into believing by pushing ourselves even more, by forcing our square peg into that round hole. Man, we are going to get it in and we are going to achieve the accomplishment that deep down we believe that we're capable of achieving, right? And when that does not happen, what happens for so many of us? The shame triggers start to percolate up. The thoughts in our minds that, oh no, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I can't do this. Maybe I'm not enough, right? Those are the thoughts that then create this buildup within ourselves that we have to push harder, that we need to do more, that it's not enough, and we have to go over and beyond our tank in order to make it work. And that's something that I think every one of us can recognize, that there are times in our lives where we have to kind of push a little bit more in order to get over the hurdle, right? That last sprint, that last push, totally different, right? So there's one thing to have a conscious awareness of, I am going in this with the intention that it's short term and it's something that's going to get me the results that I'm looking for. The flip side of it is what I am personally incredibly experienced in, and I think so many others as well, is really instead this idea that what I'm doing is not enough. This is not enough. I need to push harder. I need to be able to get the response that I'm so desiring, and I'm going to push myself until I get that sense of satisfaction, right? And what ends up happening so often, it's like chasing the carrot, right? It's impossible to achieve. And even when we do achieve it, is it worth it? Right? Being able to look back on ourselves, and I can look back on myself in the handful plus times that I have pushed myself to exhaustion and burnout. And every single one of those times, I can look back and be able to have an awareness that if I had more compassion with myself, if I were to have given myself just a little bit more grace, just a little bit more caring compassion, I would have been so much more aware to keep myself from going to the place of burnout and exhaustion, because the impact of that is so unhealthy for ourselves. It's so unhealthy for our families. We end up, I don't know about you all, when you're in a place of burnout and exhaustion, you are just not functioning as your best self, right? So there was something in here. Oh, darn. There wasn't a study on that. I thought there was a study in the little thing that I pulled up on exhaustion. But basically, I have yet to read any study that talks about exhaustion and burnout and saying that that is how we achieve our best selves, right? That's how we achieve greatness, is push yourself to exhaustion. No, it's about truly having an awareness within yourself around what that looks like and what the consequences may be, and being proactive. Because when we're truly aware of the why of what it is that's creating our desire to push ourselves beyond capacity, we start to become much more compassionate with ourselves, and we can slow ourselves down to the point of being able to breathe a little bit more deeply. Okay. The last one on the list, well, no, it's not the last one, but the last one that I had in my little notes here. But the last one I had on this list is unlearning. One thing that we really need to learn how to do is unlearning our scarcity mindset, right? That we never have enough time. There's not enough resources. We can't do that. It's not going to work, right? So the scarcity mindset is really the idea of, is not seeing change as bad, right? Is recognizing the opportunities in everything. And this is a really hard thing, because we live in a society that is very much ingrained in looking at lack, looking at deficiency, looking at not enough. And I think when we look at all the science around our tendency to have a negativity bias, it makes total sense, right? It's how we were raised. It's how we were programmed. Everything around us is lack, is deficient, is not enough, more there, less here. That's how society is run. And so challenging ourselves in that mindset, I think, is really, really a shift that is uncomfortable for many people. And so when you look at, scarcity, right? What is that scarcity mindset? And it's really the tendency of our natural state to look outside of ourselves and see that we're not enough, that we're not good enough, that who we are as we are is not enough. And that truly at the heart of a scarcity mindset versus abundance mindset is really what's at the heart of it, right? When somebody is stuck in a victim mentality, let's say, right? A victim mentality is also very much related to a scarcity mindset because it is the sense of seeing oneself as not enough. And so instead, we have to project, there's this projection from oneself out into the world as though there is something that is necessary to be given and needed to be given onto oneself in order to be seen as enough, both by the external world and by the internal world. And all of that, every single bit of that is story, right? Every single bit of that is really the story that we have told to ourselves around what how that shows up in our lives. And so there's a study from the American Psychological Association that found that employees who perceive scarcity when they look at the resources within the workplace are more likely to experience heightened stress and reduced job satisfaction. So one of the things that I would challenge each and every one of you listening and watching today, if you're watching, is pay attention to both yourself and to those that you work with. When you show up at work today or when you are at work next, pay attention to how others talk about resources, how others talk about time, how others talk about the limitations and the lack of everything around them, and pay attention to your own interpretation and perceptions around lack, around deficiency, and around scarcity. Because again, the more that we're paying attention to the fact that that is so ingrained within our environments, the more we can start to check in with it and say, is that actually true? Is that actually real? Or is that something that I am projecting based on worries, based on doubts, based on concerns? And is it necessary to project that that level out into the world? Or do I have other options? And so being able to shift that can be such a massive way of being able to find an internal sense of groundedness, right? Is I don't need to buy into that subscription. I don't need to buy into this level of that there is not enough. And perhaps I might be able to learn those skills to shift that within myself. So there was a study by Korn Ferry that said 58% of HR professionals believe that a fear of change is a major obstacle to successful organizational transformations. So a fear of change. I want to talk about that for just a second. So when we talk about unlearning anything, right? Unlearning our perfectionism, unlearning our need to set boundaries and people pleasing, unlearning all of that. Anything that we can recognize within ourselves as behaviors or habits that we know deep down we need to unlearn, that is change. That is a change within ourselves that may be needed that in order to be able to truly thrive in the way that we want to do. And so in looking at that Korn Ferry survey that says pretty much 60% of us recognize it's a fear of change that keeps us from being able to move forward, that is a perfect opportunity, y'all, to do a gut check within ourselves. Am I in that 60% around what it is that needs to change within myself in order to start shifting these paradigms within my organization. Because again, one of the things that Catherine and I will say over and over again, because repetition is the key to growth, is really around understanding how much it is the growth within ourselves that actually is going to help shift everything in terms of how we can engage in our workplaces and how we can actually help be the shift that's needed within our workplaces. Or perhaps gaining that confidence that you know that you need deep down in order to make the leap so you can join an environment where you can add the value that deep down you know that you can add. So that is something that I think is so important and so invaluable for all of us, is that regular gut checking that we will do together to make sure that we understand it's within ourselves first and foremost, that if we are stuck in any way in an area that we know that by changing is going to help ourselves thrive and thereby the people that we work with in our organizations and thereby the organizations themselves, that's when the true keys of change start to take hold. So what I'm going to do now is I want to share with you all a few of the members of the Women of HR support group who shared some of their ideas around things that need to be unlearned for them to thrive in their roles. The first one came from Sharon. Sharon had said, I need to unlearn the need to give an immediate response when asked a question. It's better to take your time to get all info you need to think through your answer. That is such a good one. That is such a good one. And I think that comes into people pleasing quite a bit, right? There's this need when something has been brought to us, right? There is a dilemma in some way and it's been dropped in our laps. We in HR need to make a very, very quick determination in terms of the sense of urgency of the situation. Always, right? That's part of the role. We need to recognize, is this something that needs to be acted upon immediately? Or is this something that I can be thoughtful about and make sure I can address in a very proactive way? And I think doing that, pressing that pause and saying, hey, you know what? I think I need to take a moment for this and come back to this in a moment is a superpower. That is something that when practice is a tremendous gift, I think, for every one of us to be able to use in the field of HR. The next one, Casey, talked about really working as a team, asking questions as a plus, asking questions being a plus, right? She talked about how she was so used to working independently and that she has to learn how to be more engaged with a team. This I relate to so well because I know for myself that working independently is, as an introvert and as somebody who thrives in solitude, I sometimes need to push myself. I absolutely must push myself in order to work with a team when that opportunity is available, because 100% of the time, I'm always thankful of what I'm able to learn. Not only learn about the situation I'm put into, but I'm always able to learn something new about myself by working with a team, right? What might have triggered me? What am I holding on to? What am I having a hard time letting go of? These are all really good self-awareness opportunities. So yes, working with a team is a great thing to unlearn. M. Norris, she shared to stop worrying what others think of me as an HR leader and remind myself that I know what I'm doing and what I'm bringing to the table. Yes, authenticity is so important in the field of HR. And when you talk about stripping the people pleasing, when you talk about putting up more boundaries, all of that truly gets down to becoming your most authentic self, truly becoming grounded in who you are as you are without needing to put up any sort of wall, any sort of mask. That is so freaking hard to do. It's so incredibly hard to do. But I think the more that you practice it, just a little bit at a time, the more you are going to be so incredibly proud of yourself. So thank you, Em. That is such a good one. Edith, this is a great one. HR and not our, oh my gosh, let me talk. HR are not law enforcement officers. This one is really, really great when it comes to recognizing our need for control, right? This idea that HR is not the law enforcement officer, and rather we are here to help support the organization. We're here to help see people thrive. We are here for so many reasons, but we are not police officers. And the more that we can let go of that need of control to police things, you've got managers for that. You've got, there's so many ways that we can kind of take a step back from that, let go of that need of enforcement and control, and instead be able to be our best for the people that we serve, and focusing on that direction, right? That opportunity direction more rather than the discipline and control, I think is a really, really good and powerful one. Edith, thank you so much. All right, 2 more here. Magnolia, she shared not being emotionally attached to the business. It's hard balancing the human element of caring for team members with not letting that spill over into the emotional bond for a company. This is tough. This is really tough. Being able to compartmentalize our true feelings sometimes, and the ability to remain impartial, the ability to remain, right? The ability to remain a very neutral tone in so many ways, in so many circumstances, and at the same time, be able to allow our heart to guide us. It's not easy. And it really does require, I think, a strong sense of self-awareness to have the full going all in with your heart, and at the same time be able to compartmentalize and separate yourself and know without a shadow of a doubt that it's not personal. Right? It's not about you. Nothing you did is your fault. And that it's really about so many other things that are completely out of your control. The only thing that you can do is show up, be your best, show up as your best. That's it. Right? And the more that you can do that and continue to take care of yourself in those walls and outside of those walls, the more you are going to be able to find that sense of authenticity that deep down is so needed. All right, the last one, and the one that got the most likes on the poll that we had on the Women of HR Support group, was from Marguerite. Marguerite, thank you so much for this. She had 38 likes on this one, and it was not to take it personally when the business doesn't take our advice. Ain't that the truth? And it does go right back to that last one, but boy, does this one hit home for me, and I think so many others, right? We know deep down what it is that could help shift the change that's needed, right? We know deep down, we think we do anyway, but being able to separate ourselves and not take it personally when that advice, when those recommendations are not taken, and be able to say, okay, all right, you make your choices. I am here to support. I'm here to guide. I'm here to advocate. But I also understand that it is what it is. And, if this is no longer serving me to put out the value that I know that I have and not be accepted, girl, you got to get out. You've got to figure out how you can choose you so that your value is accepted and appreciated the way that it should be. So thank you again, Marguerite, for that. I think that is such a great one to wrap up this episode on unlearning and recognizing that for every single one of us, it is a lifelong journey to unlearn the things that we've been programmed to to believe all our lives that perfectionism, the scarcity mindset, the inability to be able to not take things personally. So all of these just take time. They take practice. They take us together, collectively coming together and saying, you're okay. Everything's fine. This is all okay. Just try again. And we together can just start normalizing these conversations around this all being completely fine. Of all the things that we need to unlearn, we're on, the precipice of being able to make massive change in our lives, personally and professionally. And all it requires is us to continue to show up, continue to have a little bit of vulnerability, continue pushing a bit more through our comfort zone each and every day, and recognizing this journey of self-discovery and self-awareness is the key of being able to thrive and shine in human resources. So with that, I want to wish you an excellent day. I hope you have an amazing week, and I hope you join us next week on Thrive and Shine HR, where we're going to be talking more specifically about boundaries, how we can establish, maintain, and flourish through the development and the execution of healthy boundaries. All right. Every day is a new opportunity to thrive and shine in HR. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining, everyone.